My name is Susanna, and I was 32 when my world shattered. I had imagined my wedding day since childhood with my mother front row tears of joy streaming down her face. Instead, she called saying, "We just cannot afford the flight." I believed her until I saw the Facebook post 1 month later, my entire family on a luxury cruise, cocktails in hand, smiling. "Best family vacation ever," the caption read. They chose that over my wedding. I turned to Daniel and whispered, "Call the lawyer. Now." If you are watching this, please let me know where you are from. In the comments, hit that like button and subscribe, as I reveal how I discovered my family had been hiding more than just vacation photos. Growing up, I believed my mother Monica was my best friend. She raised me as a single mom for the first 8 years of my life before meeting Tom, who became my stepfather when I turned 10. We lived in a modest neighborhood in Chicago, where Monica worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and Tom managed a hardware store. Our family eventually grew, with my younger sister Katie arriving when I was 12, followed by my brother Brian 2 years later. Family gatherings were weekly traditions at our house. Sunday dinners meant grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins crowding around our expanding dining table. My grandmother would bring her famous apple pie, while my grandfather Harold would tell stories about his days as a young businessman. He built a successful construction company from nothing, always emphasizing how hard work and honesty were the cornerstones of success. "Susanna," he would say, pulling me aside, "you remind me of myself at your age. Determined, smart, always thinking ahead." Those words meant everything to me, especially when I struggled through college working 2 jobs to pay my tuition at Northwestern University. Grandfather Harold was my biggest supporter, attending my graduation with tears in his eyes. The first signs of change in my relationship with my mother appeared when I met Daniel during my final year of college. We bumped into each other at a coffee shop near campus. I spilled my latte on his economics textbook, and instead of being upset, he laughed and asked for my number. Daniel came from a family of lawyers who owned a small but respected firm, specializing in estate planning and family law. His father had built the practice from scratch, much like my grandfather had done with his construction business. When I brought Daniel home to meet my family for the first time, Monica pulled me into the kitchen with a concerned look on her face. "He seems nice, Susanna, but do you really think he is right for you?" she whispered, glancing toward the living room where Daniel was chatting with Tom. "What do you mean? He is smart, kind, and makes me happy," I replied, confused by her reaction. "I just think you could do better. His family business is so small compared to what you deserve. You have always talked about marrying someone successful, someone who could give you the life I never could." Her words stung. I had never expressed such materialistic desires, and Daniel was hardly unsuccessful. He had graduated with honors and was already working at his family firm with plans to expand their practice. "Mom, that is not fair. You do not even know him yet." That conversation marked the beginning of a growing distance between us. Each time I mentioned Daniel, Monica would find something to criticize: his career choice, his modest apartment, even the way he dressed. Tom usually stayed quiet during these discussions, but I could tell he agreed with her. Only Katie, who was 16 at the time, seemed to genuinely like Daniel. "They are being weird," Katie told me during one of our sister talks. "Daniel is awesome, and anyone can see how happy he makes you." My marketing career was taking off at a digital agency in Chicago, where I specialized in healthcare clients. Daniel and I moved in together after dating for 2 years, finding a comfortable apartment halfway between my office and his family firm. We built a life together, one Sunday dinner and movie night at a time. Meanwhile, my family invitations became less frequent. When we did visit, conversation felt strained with Monica, often finding excuses to cut our visits short. The final breaking point came at Christmas, 3 years after we started dating. Daniel and I arrived at my parents' house with gifts and homemade cookies, only to discover that the rest of the extended family had been invited for dinner the previous night. "Oh, we just thought it would be easier to do the big family dinner separately," Monica explained casually. "You know how busy everyone gets during the holidays?" Later that evening, as we drove home in silence, I finally allowed myself to cry. "They are pushing me away, and I do not understand why," I sobbed as Daniel reached for my hand. "Maybe they just need time," he offered, though we both knew something deeper was happening. My family, once the center of my world, was slowly but deliberately creating distance between us. Katie called me the next day, apologetic and upset. Mom told everyone you were too busy with work to come to the family dinner, she revealed. I tried to tell them that was not true, but she got really angry with me. It was becoming clear that my relationship with Daniel had somehow threatened my mother in ways I could not fully understand. The realization was painful, but Daniel's unwavering support gave me strength. His family welcomed me warmly, especially his parents Gregory and Elaine, who treated me like the daughter they never had. Family is not always about blood, Elaine told me one evening as we prepared dinner together. Sometimes it is about who shows up for you, who stands by you when things get difficult. Those words would prove more prophetic than I could have imagined. After 3 years together, Daniel proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. It was simple and perfect, a sunset walk along the shore where he knelt in the sand and asked me to build a life with him. I said yes, immediately, tears streaming down my face as he slipped the elegant diamond ring onto my finger. It was not flashy or ostentatious, but thoughtfully chosen to match my personality, a vintage setting that belonged to his grandmother. When we returned from our trip, I called my mother, first heart racing with excitement. Mom, I have amazing news. Daniel proposed and we are getting married. The silence on the other end lasted just a beat too long before she responded with a flat, "Congratulations. When is the wedding?" No screaming with joy. No questions about the proposal or the ring. Just a perfunctory acknowledgement that felt more like a business transaction than a celebration of one of the most important moments of my life. "We are thinking next June," I replied, trying to maintain my enthusiasm despite her lukewarm response. "Nothing too big. Maybe 60 or 70 people at that botanical garden venue we visited for cousin Melissa's birthday last year." "June is very busy for us," she said quickly. "Tom has that fishing trip with his brothers and I am not sure about our finances with Katie starting college." I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "It is almost a year away, Mom. I thought you would want to be involved in the planning." "Of course I do, sweetie. Just send me the details when you have them." But as the months passed and wedding plans took shape, my mother remained distant. She declined to come dress shopping, citing a shift she could not trade at the hospital. When I asked for her input on invitations, she said, "Whatever you like is fine, dear." Each interaction left me feeling more alone, more confused about what I had done to deserve this treatment. Daniel noticed my growing sadness and suggested we visit my parents in person to discuss the wedding. Perhaps face-to-face they would show more enthusiasm. We arrived with a bottle of wine and wedding magazines, ready to share our vision for the day. Monica sat stiffly on the couch, while Tom busied himself in the garage, conveniently avoiding the conversation. Katie, now in her first year of college, joined us via video call, genuinely excited to hear about our plans. "We would love for you to be part of the ceremony, Mom," I said, showing her photos of mother-daughter moments from weddings I had saved. "And maybe we could incorporate Grandma Rose's lace handkerchief as my something old." My mother glanced at the photos with disinterest. "Those are nice. But Susanna, have you two really thought this through? Marriage is expensive and Daniel's practice is still so small." Daniel tensed beside me, but remained polite. "Actually, we are doing quite well. The firm has taken on several new clients, and Susanna's recent promotion puts us in a comfortable position." "I am just concerned about your future," Monica insisted. "You always wanted so much more than this." The conversation deteriorated from there, with thinly veiled criticisms of our choices and suggestions that we were rushing into marriage. We left feeling deflated, the wedding magazines untouched on their coffee table. 3 months before the wedding, I sent formal invitations to my entire family. The RSVP deadline came and went with no response from my parents or brother. Only Katie confirmed she would attend, along with our elderly Aunt Nancy, who had always been kind to me. Finally, 6 weeks before the wedding, my mother called. I answered immediately, hoping for good news. "Susanna, I have been meaning to talk to you about the wedding," she began, her voice oddly formal. "Tom and I have discussed it, and we just cannot afford the flight and hotel right now. Things are tight with Brian's college tuition and some unexpected medical bills." My heart sank. They lived only 2 states away, a 3-hour flight at most. "Mom, if it is about money, Daniel and I can help with the flights. It is really important to me that you are there." "No, I cannot accept your money. That would not be right." Her voice was firm. Maybe we can celebrate when you visit next Christmas." I ended the call and broke down sobbing. Daniel held me as I cried, assuring me that we would still have a beautiful day, surrounded by people who truly cared. But the pain of my family's rejection cut deep, leaving a wound I was not sure would ever fully heal. Our wedding day arrived with perfect June weather sunshine streaming through the botanical garden's glass ceilings. Daniel's parents had stepped up in every way with Elaine, helping me prepare that morning, fixing my veil and sharing words of wisdom about marriage. Gregory gave a heartfelt toast during the reception, welcoming me to their family with genuine warmth. Katie flew in the night before, apologetic and upset on behalf of our parents. They would not even discuss it with me, she confessed. When I asked why they were missing your wedding, Mom just changed the subject. Aunt Nancy attended as well, hugging me tightly before the ceremony. "Your grandfather Harold would have been so proud of you today," she whispered. "He always said you were special." The ceremony was intimate and meaningful, with 58 guests witnessing our vows. As I walked down the aisle alone, I felt a mixture of joy and sorrow. Daniel's eyes filled with tears when he saw me, his love evident in every glance. We exchanged rings and promises, sealing our commitment with a kiss that marked the beginning of our new family, one built on love and respect rather than obligation and blood. During the reception, I found myself glancing at the empty table I had reserved for my parents and brother, decorated with photos from my childhood. The absence felt like a physical presence, a reminder of what should have been. But as the night progressed, surrounded by friends and Daniel's loving family, I made a conscious decision to focus on gratitude rather than loss. "They missed something beautiful today," Daniel whispered as we swayed to our first dance. "But I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how cherished you are." I believed him, and for that night, at least it was enough. The weeks following our wedding were filled with thank you notes, returning to work, and settling into married life. Daniel and I moved into a small but charming house in a family-friendly neighborhood, planning for the future we hoped to build together. Despite my family's absence at our wedding, I made regular attempts to maintain contact, sending photos from the ceremony and calling every Sunday. Monica responded with brief texts and shorter phone calls, always finding a reason to end our conversations prematurely. Tom never came to the phone, and Brian seemed to have adopted our parents' distance as his own policy. Only Katie remained a constant presence, visiting us whenever her college schedule allowed. "Give them time," Daniel would say when he found me staring at my phone after another unanswered call. "People come around eventually." I wanted to believe him, but each rejection reopened the wound of their absence on our wedding day. Still, I persisted, sending birthday cards and holiday wishes, determined not to let their coldness freeze me out entirely. 1 month after our wedding, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I was scrolling through Facebook while Daniel prepared dinner in the kitchen. The familiar ping of a notification drew my attention. Nancy Wilson tagged Monica Reynolds in a post. My aunt rarely used social media, so curiosity prompted me to click on the alert. The image that loaded on my screen stopped my heart. There was my mother standing on the deck of a cruise ship, cocktail in hand, wearing a flowery sundress I had never seen before. Her arm was linked with Tom's, both of them smiling broadly at the camera. In the background stood Brian and several other family members, including cousins who had also declined our wedding invitation. The caption read, "Day 3 of our amazing family cruise, Caribbean sunshine and endless margaritas with my favorite people. Best family vacation ever. Number blessed, number family time." My hands began to shake so violently that I dropped my phone. The timestamp indicated the post was just hours old, but as I scrolled through Nancy's timeline, I discovered earlier photos from the same trip dating back to our wedding weekend. There they were, my entire family boarding the ship the very day I had walked down the aisle without them. More disturbing still was a comment from my cousin Melissa on one of the photos. "So glad we finally took this trip. Only been planning it for 6 months. 6 months. They had booked this cruise half a year in advance, knowing full well it would conflict with my wedding. The room seemed to spin around me as the truth crystallized. They had not missed my wedding because of financial constraints. They had chosen deliberately, and with planning to be elsewhere. The "we cannot afford the flight" excuse was a calculated lie. "Susanna, the pasta is ready," Daniel called from the kitchen. When I did not respond, he appeared in the doorway wiping his hands on a dish towel. His smile faded instantly when he saw my face. "What is wrong? What happened?" I could not speak, only turning my phone screen toward him. Daniel sat beside me, scrolling through the photos with increasing disbelief. "They lied," I finally whispered, my voice breaking. "They said they could not afford to come to our wedding, but they could afford a Caribbean cruise. Look at the dates, Daniel. They were on that ship while we were saying our vows." Daniel's expression hardened as he continued examining the evidence. This was not a last-minute decision either. "Look at these comments about planning for 6 months." The pain that washed over me was unlike anything I had experienced before. It was not just the absence or the lie, but the deliberate choice they had made to celebrate without me, to create family memories from which I was explicitly excluded. Every smiling face in those photos felt like a personal rejection, a statement that I no longer belonged in their definition of family. "Why?" I asked, the single word containing all my confusion and hurt. "What did I do that was so terrible? They would rather be anywhere else than at my wedding." Daniel set the phone down and pulled me into his arms. "This is not about you, Susanna. This is about them and whatever issues they are struggling with. No one who truly loves their daughter would make this choice." As I sobbed against his shoulder, something shifted inside me. The sadness began to give way to anger. A slow, burning realization that I had been not just excluded, but deliberately deceived. I had spent weeks feeling guilty for not trying hard enough to include them, for somehow failing to make my wedding important enough for their attendance. Now I understood that no effort on my part would have changed their decision. "There has to be more to this," I said, pulling away to wipe my tears. "This level of deception makes no sense. They have been acting strange ever since we got engaged, even before that. It is like they resent us, but I cannot figure out why." Daniel hesitated, an odd expression crossing his face. "There is something I have been meaning to talk to you about. I was waiting for the right time, but now I think you need to know." "Know what?" I asked, suddenly alert. "It might be nothing, but through some professional connections, I recently heard something about your grandfather Harold's will. It came up when I was handling a similar estate case." The mention of my grandfather, who had passed away 2 years before I met Daniel, caught me by surprise. "What about his will?" "He left everything to my grandmother, and after she died last year, I assumed it went to Mom as their only child." Daniel shook his head slowly. "That is what I thought too, but according to my contact at the probate court, Harold left specific bequests. A significant portion was designated for you directly, Susanna. It was supposed to transfer to you when you turned 30 or got married, whichever came first." The implications hit me like a physical blow. I had turned 32 months before our wedding. "Are you saying there is money that should have come to me?" "Money my family knows about. I cannot be certain without seeing the actual documents, but yes, that is what it sounds like." A terrible suspicion began forming in my mind, connecting the dots between my family's increasing distance, their financial excuses, and now this lavish vacation. "Do you think they have been using my inheritance? Is that even possible? If your mother was named as the executor, and you were never informed of your grandfather's wishes, then yes, it is possible." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "It would be unethical and likely illegal, but it could explain a lot." The anger that had been simmering now boiled over. If what Daniel suspected was true, my family had not only lied about my wedding, but had potentially stolen what my grandfather intended for me. The betrayal was almost too enormous to comprehend. I picked up my phone again, staring at the image of my mother's smiling face, the expensive cruise ship in the background, and made a decision. "Call the lawyer," I said to Daniel, my voice suddenly steady. "Now." As Daniel made the call to his colleague Matthew, a specialist in inheritance law, I sat motionless on our couch, staring at the cruise photos that had shattered my world. Each image told a story of betrayal: my mother raising a glass in a toast, Tom lounging by the pool, Brian parasailing off the back of the ship. The timestamps haunted me most, knowing they were enjoying tropical breezes while I was walking down the aisle alone. Emotions coursed through me in waves. Shock gave way to hurt. Hurt transformed into anger, and beneath it all, a profound sense of confusion. What had I done to deserve such treatment from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally? The questions circled endlessly in my mind as Daniel spoke in hushed tones with Matthew in the kitchen. When he returned, his expression was grim but determined. "Matthew can see us tomorrow morning at 8. He says your situation is not uncommon, unfortunately. Adult children are frequently kept in the dark about inheritances, especially when the executor is an immediate family member who benefits from the lack of disclosure. So my mother could have legally kept this from me. The thought was almost as painful as the deception itself." "No," Daniel clarified, sitting beside me. "As executor, she would have a fiduciary duty to administer the estate according to your grandfather's wishes. If he left money specifically to you, she was legally obligated to inform you and transfer the assets when the conditions were met, either at 30 or upon marriage." I closed my eyes, remembering my grandfather Harold. He had always treated me differently from my siblings, taking special interest in my education and career. When I graduated college, he had hinted at plans for my future but died before elaborating. I had assumed it was just proud grandfather talk, not a literal financial provision. "I need to know more before I confront them," I said finally. "I want to see the actual will, understand exactly what grandfather intended." Daniel nodded. "That is what Matthew will help us with. He can file the necessary paperwork to obtain copies of the probate records, which are public documents. If your grandfather's estate went through proper channels, there will be a paper trail." That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, replaying memories of my mother's strange behavior over the past few years, the increasing distance after I met Daniel, the criticism of his career and our future plans, the sudden financial difficulties when it came to my wedding, despite no previous indication of money troubles. It all pointed to a disturbing possibility they had been using what should have been my inheritance, perhaps for years, and my marriage threatened to expose their deception. Morning brought no relief from my turmoil, but it did bring action. Matthew's office was warm and reassuring, with credentials on the wall that spoke to his expertise in estate law. He listened intently as I explained the situation, occasionally nodding or making notes. "Based on what you have shared, Susanna, I believe we have grounds to request full disclosure of your grandfather's will and an accounting of how his estate has been handled since his death," Matthew said when I finished. "The combination of your age, milestone, and recent marriage should have triggered any conditional bequest intended for you." "What exactly would that involve?" I asked, steeling myself for the answer. "First, we will obtain the will from probate court records. Then we will send a formal letter to your mother as executor requesting an accounting of the estate, and specifically addressing any provisions made for you. This puts her on notice that you are aware of potential irregularities and gives her an opportunity to comply voluntarily before we escalate to court proceedings." The formality of his words made the situation painfully real. I was preparing to take legal action against my own mother, a thought that would have been inconceivable just days earlier. And if she refuses to respond? Then we petition the court to compel disclosure and potentially remove her as executor if we can demonstrate mismanagement or breach of fiduciary duty. Daniel squeezed my hand supportively. "It does not have to get that far, Susanna. Once she knows you are aware of the inheritance, she might choose to do the right thing." But deep down, I doubted it would be that simple. The calculated deception around my wedding suggested this was not a misunderstanding but a deliberate choice. By afternoon, Matthew had obtained a copy of my grandfather's will from the county records office. The three of us gathered in his conference room as he spread the documents before us. My hands trembled as I read the words my grandfather had written years ago. "To my beloved granddaughter Susanna Marie Reynolds, I leave the sum of $750,000 and my property at Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, to be held in trust until she reaches the age of 30 years or enters into marriage, whichever occurs first. It is my hope that this bequest will provide her with the foundation to build the life and family she deserves, with the same values of honesty and integrity that I have tried to instill in all my descendants." The room seemed to spin around me. $750,000, the lake house, where we had spent summers fishing and watching fireflies, all intended for me, and all kept secret by my mother. "There is more," Matthew said, gently turning to another section. "Your mother was named executor, but the will explicitly states that she was to provide annual accountings to the court and notify beneficiaries when conditions for distribution were met. According to court records, she filed the initial probate documents but has not submitted any required annual accountings for the past 3 years. 3 years, I echoed hollowly. That is around when her attitude toward me started changing. When I introduced her to Daniel's expression darkened with realization. She must have known that our marriage would trigger the distribution requirement. That explains her opposition to our relationship from the beginning. The truth crashed over me like a wave. My family had not only hidden my inheritance, but had actively tried to prevent me from receiving it by discouraging my marriage. When that failed, they had simply pretended financial hardship to explain their absence, while simultaneously enjoying the fruits of my grandfather's generosity intended for me. What happens now? I asked Matthew, a new resolve hardening within me. We send the formal notice tomorrow demanding full disclosure and immediate distribution of your inheritance as required by the will. Given the circumstances and the clear documentation, I recommend we also request a full accounting of how these assets have been managed since your grandfather's death. I nodded the decision, crystallizing with perfect clarity. Do it. And include copies of the cruise photos. I want them to know exactly why this is happening now. As we left Matthew's office, I felt simultaneously drained and energized. The truth had brought pain but also liberation from the confusion and self-doubt that had plagued me for years. My family's behavior had never been about me or Daniel or our choices. It had been about money all along. Are you sure about this? Daniel asked as we drove home. Once we send that letter, there is no going back. This will change your relationship with your family forever. I looked out the window at the passing city, thinking about the family laughing on that cruise ship, while I exchanged vows without them. They changed our relationship when they chose money over honesty, when they chose a vacation over my wedding day. I am just finally acknowledging what they have already done. The letter was sent by courier the following morning, a formal legal document laying bare the deception and demanding rightful restitution. Matthew assured us that it would arrive at my parents' home by early afternoon. At exactly 5:15 that evening, my phone began to ring. The screen displayed my mother's name, the first time she had initiated contact in months. I showed it to Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. Remember, you have done nothing wrong, he said. This conversation is about their actions, not yours. I took a deep breath and answered the call, stepping into a confrontation that would either shatter my family forever or force a reckoning long overdue. How dare you send lawyers after your own family? My mother's voice trembled with fury, skipping any greeting. The background noise suggested she was in a car, probably driving home from work. Hello to you too, Mom, I replied, striving for composure despite my racing heart. I take it you received the letter from Matthew Harrison? This is outrageous, Susanna, to accuse me of stealing from you after everything I have done for you. Her voice cracked with indignation that sounded rehearsed theatrical. I am not accusing you of anything that the documents do not prove, I said quietly. Grandfather left me an inheritance that should have been transferred to me 2 years ago when I turned 30. Instead, you said nothing. Your grandfather did not understand the financial realities of maintaining a family. That money has been keeping us afloat, paying for Brian's education, covering the mortgage after Tom's hours were cut. Her justifications tumbled out rapidly, confirming what I had suspected. They had been using my inheritance as their personal funds. So you admit you knew about it and deliberately kept it from me. The confession was almost too easy, suggesting she had never expected to be caught. I was going to tell you eventually, once we were in a better position financially, she insisted, though we both knew it was a lie. But then you got involved with Daniel, and everything changed. His family has money, Susanna. You married into security. You do not need this inheritance like we do. The audacity of her reasoning left me momentarily speechless. My mother had made assumptions about my husband's financial situation, used those assumptions to justify stealing what was legally mine, and then had the nerve to suggest I was being unreasonable for wanting what my grandfather had explicitly left to me. That was never your decision to make, I finally managed, and it certainly does not explain why you chose to go on a cruise instead of attending my wedding. A brief silence followed before she responded, her voice suddenly defensive. That trip was planned months in advance, non-refundable. We had already paid deposits before your engagement. With my money, I added bitterly. And according to cousin Melissa's comment, you booked it 6 months ago, which was well after Daniel and I announced our wedding date. You deliberately chose that week, Mom. Just admit it. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had hardened. You have no idea what this family has been through while you have been off playing house with your lawyer boyfriend. Tom's health issues, Brian's college tuition, the repairs on the house. That money kept us from losing everything. He is my husband now, Mom. The husband whose wedding you skipped to sip cocktails on a cruise ship. I felt Daniel's hand on my shoulder, offering silent support. And none of what you are saying justifies lying to me for years or using my inheritance without my knowledge or consent. So that is it, you are choosing money over family. The irony of her accusation was not lost on me. No, Mom, you did that when you hid my inheritance and lied about why you could not attend my wedding. I am simply asking for what is legally mine, what grandfather wanted me to have. My phone beeped with another incoming call, Tom's number. They were tag-teaming me now. Your stepfather is calling, Monica said, as if reading my screen. He is furious, Susanna. This is tearing the family apart. The family was already torn apart, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. You just did not bother to tell me. I ended the call before she could respond, only for my phone to immediately ring again. This time it was Brian, my younger brother. I declined the call, then watched as text messages began flooding in, first from him, then from cousins and aunts. Word was spreading quickly through the family grapevine, likely with a version of events that cast me as the villain. One text from Brian caught my eye. How could you do this to Mom after everything she sacrificed for you? That money kept me in college. You and your rich husband are just being greedy. So that was the narrative they were spinning: ungrateful daughter, financially secure with a wealthy husband, greedily demanding money her struggling family needed. The distortion was breathtaking in its completeness. Daniel read the messages over my shoulder, his expression darkening. They are trying to make this about your character instead of their actions. Classic deflection. My phone rang again, this time displaying Aunt Nancy's name. I hesitated before answering, unsure which side of the family divide she would fall on. Susanna. Her voice was tentative, lacking the accusatory tone of the other calls. I just wanted to say I am sorry. I had no idea my Facebook post would uncover all this. It is not your fault, Aunt Nancy, I assured her. You just posted vacation photos. You could not have known they told me they could not afford to come to my wedding. Oh, honey, she sighed heavily. I knew they were not at your wedding, but Monica told everyone it was because you had limited the guest list to just close friends and a few relatives. She specifically asked me not to mention the cruise to you. Another lie exposed. I closed my eyes, absorbing this new betrayal. Did you know about my inheritance from grandfather Harold? No, not specifically, she admitted. But I always thought it was strange how Monica suddenly had money for renovations and vacations after your grandmother passed. Harold was always so fond of you, it makes sense he would have provided for you. As we spoke, a new email arrived from Matthew. The subject line read, "Formal response from Reynolds' family attorney. I have to go, Aunt Nancy. Thank you for being honest with me." After ending the call, I opened the email with Daniel, looking over my shoulder. It contained a terse message from a lawyer named Richard Collins, stating that he represented Monica and Tom Reynolds in the matter of the Harold Bennett estate, and requesting that all further communication go through his office. They have lawyered up, Daniel murmured. That was fast. Is that bad? I asked, suddenly worried. Not necessarily. It actually suggests they know they are legally vulnerable. I will forward this to Matthew right away. Over the next few hours, my phone continued its relentless assault of calls, texts, and voicemails. Katie finally reached me around 8 that evening, her voice tearful. Mom and Dad are freaking out, Susanna. They have been on the phone with lawyers all evening. What is happening? I explained as gently as I could, trying not to turn my sister against our parents while still being truthful. Grandfather Harold left me an inheritance that should have been mine years ago. Mom never told me about it and has apparently been using the money for family expenses, including that cruise during my wedding. Oh my God, Katie gasped. That explains so much. The new cars, the kitchen remodel last year, Brian's expensive dorm at Yale instead of the state school he was originally planning to attend. I always wondered how they were affording everything when Dad kept talking about budget cuts at his job. Her immediate acceptance of my explanation was validating after the gaslighting from the rest of my family. You believe me then? Of course I do. Mom has been weird about money for years, especially when it comes to you, and the way they skipped your wedding never made sense to me. She paused before adding, Brian is pretty upset though. He thinks you are trying to take away his college fund. That was never my intention, I sighed. This is not about punishing anyone. It is about finally getting what grandfather wanted me to have. After we hung up, Daniel suggested disconnecting my phone for the evening. You need a break from the family drama, he insisted, gently taking the device and powering it down. Matthew will handle the legal communications. Tonight, let us just be us. He was right. The constant barrage of accusations and justifications was taking a toll, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. We ordered takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and watched a mindless comedy, deliberately avoiding any further discussion of inheritances or family betrayals. As we prepared for bed, Daniel kissed my forehead gently. I am proud of you, you know. Standing up for yourself is not easy, especially against family. I just keep thinking about Grandfather Harold, I confessed. He trusted Mom to honor his wishes to give me what he intended. Instead, she used it for cruises and renovations, while lying to my face about not being able to afford a plane ticket to my wedding. What kind of mother does that? The kind who will soon have to answer to a judge, Daniel replied, his lawyer instincts surfacing. Matthew called while you were in the shower. The court has scheduled a preliminary hearing for next Thursday. Your mother will be required to provide a full accounting of the estate assets and expenditures. The legal machinery was now in full motion, a process that could not be stopped by emotional manipulation or family pressure. As I drifted toward sleep, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and resolution. The family I had known was irrevocably changed, but perhaps what would emerge from this painful process would be something more honest, more authentic, even if considerably smaller. My last thought before sleep claimed me was of Grandfather Harold and what he might think of all this. Somehow I felt he would understand my stand for truth even against his own daughter. After all, he was the one who had always told me that integrity was worth more than any amount of money in the bank. The county courthouse loomed before us, its classical columns and broad steps suddenly intimidating despite the many times I had passed it without a second glance. Matthew waited at the entrance, briefcase in hand, his presence reassuring as Daniel and I approached. Are you ready for this? Matthew asked, his expression compassionate but focused. The first hearing is primarily procedural, but your mother and her attorney will be present. It might get emotional. I nodded, straightening my navy blazer. I am as ready as I will ever be. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, more like a conference room with a raised desk for the judge. Various people in suits moved about with purpose, exchanging documents and whispered conversations. Then I saw them, my mother and Tom, sitting stiffly in the front row, a balding man in an expensive suit beside them. They did not look in my direction as we entered, though I knew they were aware of our presence. My brother Brian sat behind them, his expression stormy. Surprisingly, Katie was there too, seated a deliberate distance from our parents. When she saw me, she offered a small, encouraging smile that nearly brought tears to my eyes. At least one family member still stood with me. Judge Barbara Winters entered promptly at 9, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing eyes that seemed to assess the entire room in a single sweep. After the formalities of opening the session, she addressed the attorneys directly. I have reviewed the initial filings in this matter. We are here to address allegations of improper estate administration regarding the Harold Bennett Trust, specifically provisions for Susanna Reynolds, now Susanna Foster. Is that correct? Both lawyers confirmed the purpose of the hearing. Richard Collins, my mother's attorney, immediately attempted to frame the situation as a simple misunderstanding. Your Honor, my clients have administered the Bennett estate with the family's best interests at heart. While there may have been some delay in distributing specific bequests, there was never any intent to deprive Miss. Foster of her inheritance. We propose a structured payment plan to resolve this matter without further litigation. Matthew stood, his voice measured but firm. Your Honor, this characterization grossly misrepresents the situation. Monica Reynolds, as executor, has systematically concealed the existence of my client's inheritance for over 2 years, well past the triggering conditions specified in Harold Bennett's will. Furthermore, bank records we have subpoenaed show that approximately 80% of the designated funds have already been spent on expenses unrelated to the estate's administration or Foster's benefit. The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. That is a serious allegation, Counselor. Do you have documentation to support this claim? Yes, Your Honor. Matthew approached the bench with a thick folder. These bank statements show regular withdrawals from the trust account for personal expenses, including a luxury cruise vacation that coincided precisely with Miss Foster's wedding day, an event the Reynolds family claimed they could not attend due to financial constraints. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I kept my eyes forward, avoiding my mother's gaze, though I could feel her staring at me now. Judge Winters reviewed the documents carefully before addressing my mother directly. Mrs. Reynolds, these records indicate substantial withdrawals for what appear to be personal expenditures. Can you explain how these expenses relate to your duties as executor? My mother stood visibly nervous despite her attempt at composure. Your Honor, my father's will gave me discretion to manage the estate. The family has had significant expenses, including medical bills and education costs. I always intended to fulfill Susanna's inheritance when our financial situation stabilized. The will specifies no such discretion, Judge Winters replied, her tone sharpening. In fact, it explicitly states that your daughter's inheritance was to be transferred upon her 30th birthday or marriage, whichever came first. Both conditions have been met for some time now. We have been like parents to Susanna her entire life, my mother insisted, emotion creeping into her voice. Everything we did was for this family, including her. She married into money, Your Honor. Her husband's family has a successful law practice. We needed that inheritance more than she did. The judge's expression hardened. Mrs. Reynolds, the testator's wishes are not subject to your assessment of who needs the inheritance more. Your role as executor carried a fiduciary duty to administer the estate according to the explicit terms of the will. Richard Collins attempted to intervene, but Judge Winters silenced him with a raised hand. The court is particularly troubled by evidence suggesting you deliberately misled your daughter about your financial situation to explain your absence from her wedding while simultaneously using her inheritance funds for a family vacation. This suggests not merely poor judgment, but intentional deception. The courtroom fell silent. I stared at my hands twisted together in my lap as the judge continued reviewing the evidence. Daniel's arm around my shoulders was the only thing keeping me grounded, as my family's financial betrayal was laid bare in clinical legal terms. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, Judge Winters looked up from the documents. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds sufficient cause to remove Monica Reynolds as executor of the Harold Bennett estate, effective immediately. The court will appoint an independent administrator to conduct a full accounting of all estate assets and expenditures since Mr. Bennett's death. My mother gasped audibly, turning to her lawyer in disbelief. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mrs. Reynolds is hereby ordered to provide a complete accounting of all expenditures made from the trust within 14 days, including documentation for any claimed legitimate expenses. The court also orders an immediate freeze on all remaining estate assets pending final determination of this matter. As the judge issued further technical instructions to the attorneys, I felt a curious sense of emptiness rather than triumph. This public validation of my claims brought no joy, only confirmation of a betrayal too profound to fully process. The hearing concluded with scheduling for follow-up proceedings, and as we prepared to leave, my mother suddenly turned in her seat to face me directly for the first time. "Are you happy now?" she hissed, her voice low but intense. "You have humiliated your family in public, all for money you do not even need. You always were selfish, Susanna, but I never thought you would go this far." Before I could respond, Katie moved to my side protectively. "Stop it, Mom. You lied to all of us. You told me Susanna limited her wedding guest list when you were actually on a cruise that same weekend." "Stay out of this, Catherine," Tom warned, standing to join my mother. "You do not understand what is at stake here." "I understand perfectly," Katie retorted. "Grandfather left money for Susanna, and you spent it on yourselves instead of telling her the truth. Then you made up excuses about being broke to skip her wedding while you were actually on vacation with money that was not yours." Brian rose now too, his face flushed with anger. "This is going to ruin everything. My tuition, the house payments, everything. All because Princess Susanna and her rich husband decided they want even more money." "That is enough," Daniel interjected firmly. "This is not about taking anything from you, Brian. This is about honoring Harold Bennett's wishes for his granddaughter." "Your Honor," Matthew called, drawing the judge's attention back to the escalating family drama. "May we request a bailiff to escort my client from the courtroom? This confrontation is inappropriate." Judge Winters nodded to the uniformed officer by the door, who moved to stand between our family groups. "This matter will be resolved through proper legal channels, not courthouse arguments," she admonished. "I suggest all parties refrain from direct contact outside the presence of counsel until this case is concluded." As the bailiff guided us toward a side exit, I heard my mother's voice one last time. "You have destroyed this family, Susanna. I hope your inheritance is worth it." The words struck like physical blows, but I kept walking, Daniel's hand steady at my back. Outside in the bright morning sunshine, the courthouse steps seemed to stretch endlessly before us. Katie caught up as we reached the bottom, throwing her arms around me in a fierce hug. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I had no idea what they were doing. None of this is your fault." Her support was the one bright spot in an otherwise devastating morning. "Thank you for being there." I managed, hugging her back. It meant everything to see at least one family member on my side. "They are wrong, Susanna. All of them. What they did was terrible, and you did not deserve any of it." She glanced back at the courthouse nervously. "I should go before they come out, but I will call you later, okay?" As she hurried away, Matthew approached with an expression of cautious optimism. That went as well as we could have hoped. The judge clearly sees the merit in our case, and the appointment of an independent administrator is significant. "What happens now?" Daniel asked, his arm still protectively around my shoulders. "The administrator will conduct a thorough investigation of all estate assets and expenditures. Based on today's ruling, I believe the court will ultimately order restitution of your full inheritance. Susanna, though recovering funds already spent, may require additional legal mechanisms." It should have felt like victory, but all I could think about were my mother's parting words, the accusation in Brian's eyes, and the family that now seemed irrevocably shattered. Not by my actions, I reminded myself firmly, but by their choices long before I discovered the truth. As we walked to the car, Matthew added one final observation. "Family estate disputes are always difficult, but I want you to know that what your mother and stepfather did was not just morally questionable, but legally actionable. You had every right to pursue this claim, and the court clearly agrees." His validation helped, but the emotional toll of the morning left me drained and silent for most of the drive home. It was only when we pulled into our driveway that I finally spoke the question that had been haunting me since the hearing began. "Did I do the right thing, Daniel? They are still my family despite everything." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "You did not create this situation, Susanna. They did through years of deception. All you did was stand up for yourself and for what your grandfather wanted you to have. That took courage, not selfishness." I nodded slowly, wanting to believe him. The road ahead would be difficult, with more legal proceedings and family fallout to navigate. But for the first time since discovering those cruise photos, I felt the faintest stirring of something like peace. Not because of the money or the legal victory, but because I had finally stopped accepting lies as my due, stopped allowing myself to be manipulated by people who should have protected me. As we entered our home together, I realized that perhaps family was not defined by blood or legal documents after all, but by honesty, respect, and love, given freely without conditions or expectations. By that definition, my true family might be smaller than I once believed, but it was also far more genuine. 1 year after that fateful day in court, I sat on the porch of the Lake Geneva cabin that had once belonged to my grandfather Harold. The autumn leaves created a canvas of crimson and gold against the clear blue sky, reflecting perfectly on the still water. This place, now legally mine, after months of legal proceedings, had become my sanctuary. A physical connection to the grandfather who had believed in me enough to secure my future. The independent administrator appointed by Judge Winters had conducted a thorough investigation of the estate, revealing even more extensive misappropriation than we had initially suspected. Beyond the cruise and Brian's college tuition, my mother and Tom had renovated their kitchen, purchased 2 new vehicles, and even made investments in Tom's brother's startup business, all using funds designated for me. In the end, the court ordered full restitution of my inheritance, $750,000 plus the lake house property. Much of the money had already been spent forcing my mother and Tom to take out a second mortgage on their home and liquidate other assets to comply with the judgment. The financial consequences for them were significant, but as Matthew explained, they were the natural result of years of unauthorized spending, not my decision to claim what was legally mine. The emotional aftermath proved even more complicated than the legal battle. Despite multiple attempts at reconciliation, my relationship with my mother remained fractured. Our last conversation 3 months ago had ended with her still insisting that I had chosen money over family loyalty. "You will never understand what we were going through," she had said, her voice distant over the phone. "We did what we had to do for the family." "But I was part of that family too, Mom," I had replied softly. "At least I thought I was." The silence that followed contained all the pain and misunderstanding of the past years. We had not spoken since. Tom refused any contact whatsoever, and Brian, whose Ivy League education had been partially funded by my inheritance, maintained that I had selfishly disrupted his life for financial gain. The irony of his accusation was not lost on me, but I had stopped trying to make him see the situation from my perspective. Not all family relationships were beyond repair, however. Katie visited regularly, currently finishing her senior year of college with a scholarship she had earned on her own merit. Aunt Nancy had also remained supportive, occasionally joining us at the lake house for weekend retreats. She had recently sent me a box of old photos from my childhood, including several of Grandfather Harold and me fishing off the dock just yards from where I now sat. "He always said you were special," she had written in the accompanying note. "Not because you were smarter or prettier than the others, but because you had integrity. He would be proud of how you handled all of this." Her words had brought tears to my eyes when I first read them, and they still resonated now as I watched Daniel emerge from the cabin carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. His law practice had flourished over the past year, focusing increasingly on estate planning and inheritance issues. My own career had evolved as well. I had left my marketing agency to start a consultancy specializing in communication strategies for family businesses, drawing on my personal experience to help others navigate complex family dynamics in professional settings. "Penny, for your thoughts," Daniel asked, settling beside me on the porch swing. "Just reflecting on everything that has happened. It is hard to believe it has been a year." He nodded, understanding as always. "Any regrets?" I considered the question carefully. I regret that it came to this. I regret that my mother and Tom chose deception over honesty. I regret that Brian cannot see past his own interests to understand the principle involved. I paused, watching a leaf detach from a nearby maple and drift slowly to the ground. But I do not regret standing up for myself. I needed to do that, not just for the inheritance, but for my own sense of self-worth. Daniel squeezed my hand. "I think that is why your grandfather left you this place. He saw something in you that he wanted to nurture, something beyond the money itself." "I think you are right." I sipped my chocolate, allowing the warmth to spread through me. The past year has taught me that family is not just about blood or legal documents. It is about who shows up for you, who tells you the truth even when it is difficult, who celebrates your joys without resentment, and supports you through your sorrows without keeping score. The realization had been gradual but profound. While losing my connection with my mother and brother remained painful, I had gained clarity about what healthy relationships should look like. I had also discovered strength. I never knew I possessed the courage to establish boundaries and stand firm in the face of emotional manipulation. Part of my inheritance had gone toward establishing the Bennett Foundation for Financial Literacy, a nonprofit organization providing education and resources for women experiencing financial abuse. The foundation had already helped dozens of women understand their rights and navigate complex financial situations, particularly in family contexts where money was used as a control mechanism. "I got a call from the foundation today," I told Daniel, smiling at the memory. "Remember Lori, the woman whose ex-husband had been hiding assets during their divorce? She finally received her settlement and has enrolled in nursing school. Her daughter is starting high school this fall, with a new confidence now that they have financial stability." Daniel smiled. "That is what healing looks like. Taking your pain and transforming it into something that helps others." He was right. Each woman who found her voice and reclaimed her financial independence helped heal a small piece of my own wounded heart. The foundation had become an unexpected source of purpose and joy, a way to honor my grandfather's memory by extending his generosity beyond our family. As the sun began to set over the lake, casting long golden reflections across the water, I placed a protective hand over my slightly rounded belly. Our first child, a daughter, was due in spring. We had already decided to name her Eleanor Harold Foster, combining Daniel's grandmother's name with my grandfather's legacy. "Do you think we will ever tell her the whole story?" Daniel asked, noticing my gesture. "Someday when she is old enough to understand," I nodded. Not to burden her with family drama, but because there are important lessons in what happened. About standing up for yourself. About the difference between generosity and entitlement. About how money can reveal character but does not determine it. The greatest lesson I had learned through this painful journey was that true wealth had little to do with bank accounts or property deeds. It was found in relationships built on mutual respect and honesty, in the courage to face difficult truths, and in the freedom that comes from living with integrity even when it costs you something you thought you could not bear to lose. As darkness fell, Daniel and I moved inside, closing the door on the chill of the autumn evening. The cabin was cozy, with lamplight filled with a mixture of my grandfather's original furnishings and pieces Daniel and I had carefully selected together. It felt like home in a way my parents' house never had, perhaps, because here every decision reflected our authentic selves rather than appearances or expectations. A new family was beginning within these walls, one founded on principles of transparency and respect. While I could not change the painful chapter that had brought me here, I could ensure that its lessons informed the story we would write moving forward. Not a story of bitterness or retribution, but one of resilience, growth, and the quiet power of living truthfully. Looking around at this place my grandfather had loved and entrusted to me, I felt a sense of coming full circle. He had given me more than property or money. He had given me a foundation from which to build a life of integrity. In honoring his wishes, despite the personal cost, I had discovered my own strength and redefined what family truly meant. The inheritance had never really been about the money after all. It was about claiming my worth, establishing healthy boundaries, and creating a legacy of honesty for the next generation. That was a heritage worth fighting for, worth all the pain and loss that had accompanied its discovery. As I prepared for bed that night, I paused before the window overlooking the moonlit lake. "Thank you, grandfather," I whispered to the stars reflecting on the water's surface. "For everything." In the stillness that followed, I felt a profound sense of peace, as if he had somehow heard and understood. The past could not be changed, but the future remained unwritten, full of possibilities for healing and growth. That was the true inheritance I would carry forward and someday pass on to my own daughter. What would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you financially like my family did? Would you fight for what was rightfully yours, even if it meant possibly losing relationships? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message about standing up for themselves, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most difficult choices lead to the most meaningful growth.